everyone. I'm John Evans. Welcome to another episode of One-on-One. Suzanne McCormick has spent the past 25 years working for organizations that serve the community. She headed up a Red Cross chapter. She was the president and CEO of 2 United Way chapters. And that service doesn't even count the time that Suzanne served overseas as a volunteer in Thailand with the Peace Corps. Well, the Wilmington native's new job is going to have her not just serving people in one community, but serving people all across the United States as the new U.S. president for United Way Worldwide. Suzanne McCormick, Wilmington native, soon to be United Way U.S. president. Welcome to the One-on-One with John Evans podcast.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
First off, let me just say congratulations. It is an awesome bit of news that you are going to be the U.S. president for United Way Worldwide. Tell me a little bit more about that job.
Well, across the United States, there are over 1,200 United Ways that serve about 96% of the United States. And we come in different sizes, and we're in little communities and big communities. And one of the keys to our success is how we work together. And my job is to help support United Ways of all sizes in serving their communities, particularly thinking about ways if we work smarter together, we can do more in our communities.
And I looked at the news release that was posted on the United Way website. It said, "Will be responsible for building a modern United Way and leading the continued digital transformation through the organization's enterprise technology platform adoption." And I said to myself, boy, I hope she can boil that down for me because I'm technology challenged. Boil that down for people at home. What will you be doing?
Well, we're an organization that's been around for over 130 years now, and our model was to go into the workplace and to engage employees in supporting the community, mostly with a financial contribution. And back in the olden days, we'd go in and we'd hand out a bunch of paper pledge cards, and we'd have people sign them, and we'd collect them, and then we'd go and we'd process those donations. Well, these days, people want to give through technology. And so one of our big initiatives right now is to get more of our local United Ways really leveraging the use of technology to engage community, not only to support financially, but also to get connected to volunteer opportunities and causes that they care about. So we have a new digital platform that we are offering to our corporate partners. It came from a partnership with Salesforce, and our big push right now is to get more of our companies to use this platform because it's driven by artificial intelligence. It's really dynamic. It's really engaging, and we know, especially younger employees, they want to touch, feel, get involved really, really quickly, and we can't do it on paper anymore. So that's a little more than a nutshell, but
yeah, okay. that breaks it down for me a little bit better than that 3-line description. Can you tell me, will you be like the boss, or will you be working alongside all these local and state agencies? Say the Cape Fear, United Way of the Lower Cape Fear area here. Will you be a partner with them? Will they report to you? How does the structure work?
No, they will not report to me. So every United Way is an autonomous 501c3 nonprofit organization and has a local independent board of governors. However, to be a United Way, you have to agree to certain membership criteria. And that's everything from how you use the United Way brand to what kind of financial oversight you put in place, how you approach diversity, equity, inclusion. So no one will report to me except my job is to make sure that those local United Ways meet those membership certifications. And really my job is to partner and help support them to be the best local United Way they can be.
You were in charge of the United Way Suncoast in Tampa. Before that, you were with the United Way of Greater Portland, Maine. One agency. Now you're going to be with 1,100 or almost 1,200. Has that set in yet?
Not entirely, although I don't start my job I don't really officially start until the end of July, and it's starting to set in because already when I'm looking at where I'm being asked to go in that first month, I've been asked to come to Columbus. I've got a trip planned to Detroit. I'll be going, and this is outside of going to Alexandria. So I think I think my Sky miles and my American airline miles are gonna, my status is gonna go up pretty quickly.
I can understand that. Will you be the point person then? If someone wants to talk to a representative from the United Way National, they will then reach out to you as opposed to someone in the local office?
Yes. Well, again, I think that's really where partnership's going to come into play, because the last thing I want to do with our local United Ways is to insert myself in a relationship in an uninvited way. But yes, if there is a national organization or a national partner and they want to talk about partnering with United Way beyond one community, then I would be the person they would come to. But I always want to do that in partnership, with our local United Ways. So it's a lot about diplomacy and influencing.
We'll get back to a little bit more of the United Way stuff in a second. Did you think when you were walking off the campus of New Hanover High School 20 blah, blah, blah years ago that you would reach presidency of United Way US?
No. I think when I was walking off the campus in 1985 as a Wildcat, I was thinking it's time to get to college and reinvent myself. I was a good student, but I got an A+ in social life too. So it was time for me to go and do a little reinvention. But I will say I think one of the most formidable moments for me in my career at New Hanover High School was as the editor of the yearbook my senior year when in our final edition of the yearbook, we had a summer edition put in, and in that, when one of the pictures finally was blown up and we could see it in the yearbook, and we had been rushed for the proof, there was a terrible racial slur that had been written on the back. We did a party scene, and there were a bunch of boys around a keg, which you could drink when I was in high school, and on this sheet behind them that said class of '85, when the picture was blown up, which back in those days you couldn't see, that pictures were digital, there was a racial slur, and it started a race riot at New Hanover High School. If you search the news archives, you can see it, and I felt an enormous sense of responsibility, and I definitely know that was the beginning of my passion around social justice, which then did take shape at Duke, and then so there was some foreshadowing, I would say.
You weren't born in Wilmington. You were actually born, I guess, in Iowa City. How did your family come to live here in Wilmington, and what are your earliest memories of the city?
We came, well, my dad was finishing up med school at University of Iowa when I was born, and I lived in Iowa for all of 6 months. And then he did his residency in the U.S. Navy. So my early years were in Portsmouth, Virginia. And when my father left the Navy and he decided to go into private practice, he chose Wilmington. So we moved when I was in the 3rd grade, and my earliest memories are of being in Mrs. Cruz's 3rd grade class at College Park Elementary School. And I can remember the school vividly, and it was a wonderful experience. And I have my childhood friends from those years are still my dearest friends.
Really, once you step into this community, I haven't wanted to leave. I know you did for career opportunities, but this is a place where a lot of people put down roots and love to stay.
Oh, absolutely. My mom is still there. My brother and his wife are there. And my sister, who is 2 years older than I am, she also, all of us went to New Hanover. She just recently moved back. She had a long career out west, and she has just come back and bought a house on Oak Island. So I am constantly jealous of my family being together all the time. So I'm hoping to make more trips. I was up in early April and just had a lovely visit.
Well, you're in Tampa. That's a pretty good oceanside community as well down there.
It is. It's different though.
What did you want to study? I mean, as you're going through New Hanover, did you have a thought of what the career might take you to? I know you talked about possibly law school when you went to Duke. Was that a real serious thought, or were you just kind of, I've got to see where my life takes me?
I think I went in with an open mind. I was always interested in current events. My dad, when he ran for the school board, I remember like, going around neighborhoods, passing out unsecker for Board of Education rulers. And so he gave me some early exposure to politics, and I knew that I was interested in that. And so going into Duke, I had an interest in sort of current events, which took me to public policy or political science. So again, I think there was some foreshadowing. I didn't go in knowing I was going to be a lawyer. It's once I got in there, or thinking I was going to be a lawyer, I was sort of more interested in the idea of how can I advocate for the underdog, and I thought being a lawyer may allow me to do that. And then I discovered the Peace Corps instead.
I listened to an interview that you did regarding the Peace Corps, and a couple of quotes that came out of that interview. Quote, "I got a butt kicking." Quote, "I learned Americans are not the greatest." And quote, "I came back a humbled American." That sounds like 2 years that really transformed your life.
Without question, it was the most important educational experience I had. To go live as in another country where you are a minority, it teaches you humility. I served in Thailand, and I was up in a really rural, small village in the northeastern part of Thailand, not where any of the tourists go. I lived in a little village out in the rice fields, and I was taller by a head of many people in my village, and the Thais have a word for foreigner that they use very liberally. It's farang. And so whenever I would go out, especially, well, I was the first white that many of my village had ever seen. And anytime I went anywhere, all I would hear was farang, 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 farang. Mm-hmm. And, that got tiresome fast, but it also taught me every day I felt different. And for 2 years, every day knowing that you're different gave me a deep appreciation for other people who feel like they're different all the time. So yeah, it was the master in teaching humility.
What was it that you brought back? Did you bring back a deeper desire then to want to get in and help people? Because I know you went to New York and worked before you got into United Way, but you were with the Red Cross, you were with a couple of other organizations that all seem to advocate for people who need help.
Without question. When I got in the Peace Corps, I fell in love with the idea of service. I mean, once I was there, I knew that it was my purpose and my calling. And, leaving my Peace Corps assignment, many of my close friends made the decision to continue to stay overseas and do work overseas. When I came back to the U.S., again, I was so struck by how much we have, how much we don't appreciate necessarily. And so felt even more committed to service, but felt like there's so much need in the United States. In some ways, it felt like it would be easier to go do aid work in other countries than it would to do it in the U.S. And that's when I made the commitment to really try to help folks in my country. I felt like I'd helped another country, and now it was time for me to help my country. And
is that really kind of where I learned Americans are not the greatest? Is that where that kind of quote came from?
It is. Well, what I meant by that is there are many other cultures in the world that are just as amazing as Americans and as the American culture, and we need to appreciate them all. And there is sometimes a mindset in the U.S. that no one is better than we are, and yet there are elements of other cultures that I experienced that I thought in some ways were better. I mean, there was just this sense of family, sense of nature. It just taught me that we can't think we're the greatest country on the planet without recognizing the value of other cultures and countries, because there's so much out there that needs to be appreciated.
Did you ever feel unsafe over there, or ever come close to being in any danger?
There were a couple times when I felt unsafe, and the thing that made me feel most unsafe was the perception that some of the younger folks who lived in my village, who had never never before met an American. All of their education about America honestly came from Rambo movies. Oh. And so they thought everything was about like shoot 'em up, and every woman is, there to walk around in high heels. And so this sense of sometimes I would be in crowds and people's perception of what an American was sometimes made me feel unsafe. And then I will say there are a couple situations where there's a hierarchy between male and female in Thailand that does not necessarily exist outright in the U.S. And there were times when I didn't feel totally comfortable, but I never was in danger. Never in danger. It was an interesting time. I was there during the first Iraq War, and I would have to I'd hear the news on the bus from people talking, and that was the hardest thing for me. Was I was there before there was technology, and the only way that I communicated with my family and friends was through writing. So it took a long time to get the news.
Right. You were with the Red Cross of Southern Maine, and then with an organization called the People's Regional Opportunity Program. So I take it you moved to Maine for the Red Cross opportunity and then grew into the second one?
Well, actually, when we moved to Maine, I started my career in Maine with United Way, and I worked my way through 4 or 5 different positions, sort of worked my way up, and finally got to a point where I felt like I was ready to take on more of a leadership role in the organization, and had the opportunity to go to the Red Cross in sort of just below the CEO position. Mm-hmm. And within 6 months of me moving to Red Cross, my boss, she moved on to a national position, and that's when I got my first CEO position, and it was with Red Cross. And I was there for 5 years, and not really looking to lead, but another organization in our community that actually had a broader, I think more impactful mission on a day-to-day basis, really encouraged me to look at applying for their CEO position, and I did, and that's when I moved to, we called it PROP, People's Regional Opportunity Program. It's a program that focuses on mostly serving families in poverty. We ran all the Head Start child care programs. We did all the food stamps, all the heating, cooling assistance. Mm-hmm. So really comprehensive anti-poverty kind of organization. And then I went back to United Way as the CEO when the woman who had hired me in 1994 retired.
Yeah, so you were up in Maine for the better part of, I guess, about 14 years, 13 or 14 years?
Actually, we were there for 20 years.
20 years? Oh,
yes.
A lot longer then, okay.
Yeah.
Did the winters get tiring from somebody who's from Wilmington?
Yes, at first, especially before we had kids, my husband and I met as ski instructors in Breckenridge, Colorado. So we both love skiing, we both love the outdoors. And so, at the beginning, we did all outdoor sports. It was awesome. Like, we loved it. And then we had kids, and it was still fun, but it's harder with kids. And mm-hmm. and then I didn't realize how hard the winters were until when we finally left, and I look back and I think, how in the world did we stand it for so long? Because it was hard. Yeah. But the people of Maine are very earnest, and you would never admit that you didn't love winter. So we played along with that. But it's really nice to be back in the South, I will say. Although Florida's not really the South. It's its own special kind of South. Yeah,
it is its own entity. Let's leave it. That's a good way of describing it. What made you then go to Tampa? I read something, and you said something about looking for a more diverse community.
That's exactly right. Well, again, we were very happy in Maine. We were not looking to leave, but I got a call one day. I won't tell you all the details, but the opportunity was put in front of me, and the call was, I think, really strategically placed on a snowy day in winter. And I went home that night and I said to my family, "What do you guys think about moving to Florida?" And I had my kids were 5th grade and 7th grade, and they're like, "Yeah, let's go to Florida." And so it was really started as I said to my husband, "What can it hurt? I might as well go down and look at it. I mean, I'll get a free trip to Florida out of it." And when I came down and I got to get to know the United Way here, it's larger. It's a larger metro area than where I was, obviously. And I really, really love the fact that the community here looks like what America looks like. There is an enormous amount of diversity. And, as my husband and I thought about the opportunity, while our kids had an amazing childhood living in mostly rural Maine, the only diversity they had been exposed to was socioeconomic. And this seemed like a really great opportunity for them to come live in a community that looks like what the world looks like. And it's been fabulous.
Yeah. Okay, Mom, now you're living in Florida for 5 years, and you get this opportunity, and it's headquartered in Arlington, Virginia, with United Way Worldwide. Put your mom hat on and tell me what kind of a sell job you had to do for the family there.
Well, I will say we are a family that was already going to be in transition this year, and I'll tell you about that. But my daughter has been, she's one of my biggest fans, and she's 16. She's going to be a junior in high school, and she has known that I've had aspirations to lead nationally for some time, because we talk about girl power and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And so she's super proud, and fortunately, I have the opportunity that I will be able to commute for the next 2 years. Oh. And so she's going to stay here. Tampa will remain home for us for the next 2 years. And she'll get to finish high school. She and my husband are a dynamic duo anyway. She's a competitive soccer player, and we joke that he works for her. He's her team manager. And then my son, Jack, he just graduated from high school, and he actually will be leaving the day before I leave to start basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. He has enlisted in the U.S. Army.
Awesome.
So he and I are going to be going on our big adventures, and my husband Bill and Fiona are going to hold down the fort here.
That's a big switch for this family and for you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Jack's really seems like a bigger switch than my switch. I mean, I've always seen that I was going to do this. He surprised us. Well, I should say, so much of the work that I do and advocacy that I do now for kids and families is we have to break down the stereotype that every kid has to go to a 4-year college, because that's not right for every kid, and it's not the right career path for every kid. And but I expected that my son, when he graduated, would go to college and then go to the Army. And he was accepted at the University of North Georgia and got an ROTC scholarship, but he's decided that he's really ready to go now. And so we're going to support him, and we're super proud, and it's going to be a journey for sure.
Yeah, well, good for him, and tell him early on, thank him for his service on behalf of us. Are you going to be trying to be more of an ambassador for this organization? I mean, you're going to hear more of the praise. You're also going to hear more of the complaints. So it's a different level for you, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes, I one of the things I'm looking forward to most is representing us across the United States, again, in partnership with our local United Ways. But I think there's a huge opportunity for us to think about new national partnerships, not just with corporations, but with other nonprofits. How do we work better together? There's a lot of synergy between our organization and other leading organizations. An example I would give you is Feeding America. What Feeding America wants to do is very similar to what we want to do. So what are some of those national partnerships that I can help forge to serve all of our communities? Yeah, I very much want to represent the brand, and I want to help build stronger communities across the U.S. and I'm excited about that.
When we deal with the public, just like you do, I do, when somebody doesn't like us or has a criticism, these days I've felt they're more at ease in airing those criticisms. So how do you deal with some of the criticisms about more of my money should go to the organizations, or administration costs need to be lower? What is your thought process and your answer to some of those criticisms?
Well, first of all, I'm always careful. I will listen to any criticism in public or written directly to me with a name, but I've taught myself not to pay attention to anything that is anonymous.
Understand. Good point.
Because that's, I think, is really unhealthy.
Good point.
I think part of what I try to do is help people understand that for us, well, first of all, what I love people to understand is that being a nonprofit does not mean it's not a business model. It's a tax status. And so each of our nonprofits are businesses, and you have to have core functions in a business to be able to run your mission. And I think sometimes there's an unrealistic expectation that nonprofits will go without. And would be asked to do things we would never ask a private, for-profit company to go without. So part of it's helping people understand that it does cost money to raise money. But I will say United Ways are still some of the most efficient, effective organizations out there in terms of making sure the most dollars go directly to impact versus overhead. The other thing I would say is one of my main priorities leading the U.S. network is to look for opportunities where we can consolidate and save money. One thing that is true and that we do have to change is that every nonprofit, every United Way and every nonprofit doesn't necessarily have to have its own HR department, its own finance department. I mean, there's certainly ways that we could save money on those admin functions if we can work together. So that's one of my goals.
All thoughts are good, all arguments are at least listened to. Where did that come from?
Did I say that?
Yes, you did.
Well, as I think one of my strengths, I'm a middle child, and so I spend a lot of time in the gray area, and I'm not very seldom a black or white person. I really do think one of my strengths is being a good listener, and that's how we build community. That's how we build collaboration. And I think I probably learned that in the early days, all through my life being a middle child. I'm also the child. My parents got divorced when I was in 8th grade, and so I also had to learn to broker and listen and think diplomatically about, for a time, which were two really different points of view. So I had a lot of training as a kid to be a connector and a collaborator.
And you probably also had in your life experience growing up, and I know in your life and your schedule, my father was a doctor. You don't work 9 to 5 when you're a doctor. You're in nonprofit fundraising and helping and gifting. You don't work 9 to 5 when you're in those businesses either. So my family, my wife learned early on, John's not going to be there. He's going to put in more than just that 9 to 5 every day. Did your husband, I guess, bought into that early, and your kids realized that early, maybe because of your experience growing up?
Well, my kids have always only had a working mom. Even when I had them, I took some time off, but I went back to work, and so that's been a part of their life. I think what has worked for our family is that at different points of our careers, meaning my career and my husband's career, at the different points there was more give and take by one of us. So my husband is a physical therapist, and he built a very, very successful practice, and during one part of his career, he was the one who was out most, and I at that point really tried to figure out how to be more present for my kids. Through this last transition, that flip-flopped, and he really stood up and stood in for our kids. So I think the success of our family has been to spend time together when you can, but my husband and I always try to make sure one of us is involved and accessible.
Okay, I have some questions that I usually try to ask every guest that I have. They're kind of just open-ended questions, but I want to hit you with a couple of these.
Okay.
What is your perfect day off?
Oh, that's easy. I just had one. My perfect day off is while I'm very extroverted in my professional life, I am genuinely an introvert. And so a perfect day, yesterday was a perfect day for me. It was a Sunday. I got up, I ran 3.5 miles. I came home and did a little, few chores around the house because that helps me connect to my environment, which I really like. I finished 2 books. I finished a puzzle. I'm a big puzzler. I always have a 1,000-piece puzzle going at my house. And then in the evening, I tried a new recipe and cooked dinner and had a couple glasses of wine, watched women's soccer, and went to bed early. Like, that's a perfect day for me.
That's a perfect day. That sounds like a good one. Who do you most admire?
I don't like superlatives. I had great admiration for my parents. I had great admiration for my father when he's not living, when he was living and after.
Right.
And for my mom too. They're both incredibly strong people in different ways. I also have a lot of admiration for both my kids right now, just in the journeys where they are. They're strong and they're funny and they make me laugh every day.
And that's a good thing. Anybody who can laugh every day is a good thing to get that humor in. Do you remember a teacher or a person who most impacted your life?
Absolutely. My all-time favorite teacher at Noble Junior High School before New Hanover. Well, I have a couple. I could name a couple, but
Okay.
Annette Hall. She actually was my teacher, and then she was the librarian, and she's still close to my family. She inspired me to read and be creative. I also loved Mr. Sam Gardner, who was the yearbook editor at New Hanover High School. He was wacky and fun and let us be creative as well. I had a lot of good teachers, but Miss Hall and Mr. Gardner are probably my two favorites.
They're going to be very happy that they heard you mention them since you're such a success. What's something you have to do before you put your head down on the pillow every night?
I turn off my cell phone.
Well,
well, my husband would tell you I have no trouble going to sleep. I'll go 100%, and I don't really sit down except for those times when I'm reading or doing a little bit on the weekend. I just pretty much go like 100 miles an hour, and then when my head hits the pillow, I'm out. Like I've already sort of made my to-do list, thought about the day. I try to put out my running clothes so it's easy to like not be able to not do it in the morning. I don't have many rituals though.
there are some people who think about their kids. There are some people who talk to mom before they go to. I just was kind of curious if you had anything that you did every night kind of before you lay down and go to sleep.
Well, if my kids are home, I always try to go kiss them and tell them good night. But more often than not, they're the ones who are coming in and telling me good night when I'm already asleep.
Waking you up, I'm home, Mom. Go back to bed.
And then I can't remember it because I was in such a deep sleep.
Last one. I don't like it when blank.
I don't like it when people immediately jump to the negativity in a situation.
Suzanne, all the best to you. Congratulations on the new job. And
Thank
it sounds like you have a successful family who is really behind you 100%.
Thank you, John. Thanks so much for having me.
And I hope to see you again when you come back to Wilmington. Come and spend some time along this coast soon, too.
I absolutely will. I promise.
A big thank you to Suzanne McCormick for sparing some of her valuable time and joining us for this week's podcast. She starts her new job July 31st, and you can keep up with her and her organization at unitedway.org. Before we go, I'd like to ask you again to please subscribe to the One-on-One with John Evans podcast on whatever podcast app you use. And please, if you would be so kind, leave us a rating or a review. Tell us what you think of our product. The more ratings and reviews we get, the higher we'll be listed on the apps, and the more new listeners we'll be able to bring in. I'm John Evans. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of One-on-One.